The morning the town of Ravenspire stopped in its tracks began with three shadows walking down a dusty road, three young women, identical in strength but different in spirit, carrying nothing but small bags and a past no one had ever expected to return. 15 years earlier, no one believed those girls would survive, let alone come back. Before we dive into this unforgettable journey, take a moment to like, comment, share, and subscribe to Wisdom Story House if you believe in kindness and second chances, because this story is exactly about that. Back then, Harun Qadri was a man most people overlooked. He was a thin, quiet laborer who worked long days fixing broken furniture and odd things around town. His clothes were always worn, his shoes barely holding together, and his small home sat at the far edge of Ravenspire where the roads turned to dust. People nodded at him out of politeness, but few truly saw him. Harun had lost his wife years earlier during a harsh winter, leaving him alone with a grief that never quite faded. He had no children, no family left, and no reason, at least in the eyes of others, to take on any more hardship. But everything changed one afternoon when he found the three girls. They were sitting behind the old grain warehouse, huddled together like frightened birds. The eldest, barely 10, tried to shield the younger two with a fierce, protective stare. Their clothes were torn, their faces smudged with dirt, and their eyes held a kind of silence that spoke louder than cries. Most people had passed them that day, pretending not to notice. Harun didn't. He didn't ask many questions. He simply sat down beside them and offered the bread he had saved for his dinner. They hesitated at first, then took it with trembling hands. That moment, small and fragile, became the beginning of something no one in Ravenspire could have predicted. The girls had no home. Their parents had vanished after a failed migration attempt, leaving them stranded. Authorities were slow, overwhelmed, and indifferent. The town whispered that it wasn't anyone's responsibility. But Harun made a decision that very evening. He brought them home. The news spread quickly, and not kindly. People called him foolish. Some said he could barely feed himself, let alone three children. Others warned that taking in strangers would ruin what little stability he had left. Harun listened to none of it. He gave the eldest girl the name Safia, because she had a quiet strength. The middle one became Meher, gentle and observant. The youngest, barely 5, he named Noor, because even in her fear, she carried a soft light. Life was not easy. Their small home grew crowded overnight. Harun worked longer hours, often skipping meals so the girls could eat. Winters were especially harsh, with thin blankets and nights that seemed endless. The girls fell sick more than once, and Harun sat awake through countless nights, praying they would recover. There were days when the burden felt unbearable. When exhaustion weighed on him so heavily that even standing felt like a struggle. But every time he looked at the girls, laughing over something simple, slowly learning to trust again, he found a reason to keep going. Safia took on responsibilities beyond her years. She helped cook, cleaned the house, and watched over her sisters when Harun was away. Meher found comfort in books, often borrowing old ones from a kind shopkeeper who saw something special in her. Noor, the youngest, brought laughter back into the house, her giggles filling spaces that had once been silent. The town watched from a distance. At first, it was skepticism. Then curiosity. Over time, something unexpected began to grow, respect. People noticed how the girls changed. Their fear softened into confidence. Their silence turned into voices. They began attending school, walking each morning with worn backpacks but heads held high. Harun never sought recognition. He never told his story. He simply lived it. Years passed. Slowly, quietly, life began to shift. Safia excelled in her studies, earning a scholarship that allowed her to leave Ravenspire for a prestigious academy in the city. It was a bittersweet moment. Harun was proud, but the house felt emptier without her steady presence. Meher followed a different path, drawn to medicine after witnessing the struggles of their early years. She studied tirelessly, eventually securing a place in a medical college far away. Noor, the youngest, surprised everyone. Her love for art turned into a passion for design. She left to pursue her dreams, carrying with her the warmth of the home Harun had built. One by one, they left. And Harun was alone again. But this time, it was different. The house still echoed with their memories, the laughter, the struggles, the quiet moments of togetherness. He held on to those like treasures. Though his body grew older and his steps slower, his heart carried a quiet pride. The town, too, had changed. People who once doubted him now spoke of him with admiration. Children grew up hearing stories of the man who had taken in 3 abandoned girls and raised them as his own. Still, as the years passed, a question lingered in everyone's mind. Would they ever come back? Then came that morning. The sun had barely risen when the first figure appeared on the road. Then a second. Then a third. By the time they reached the center of town, people had already begun to gather. There was something unmistakable about them, the way they walked, the quiet strength in their eyes. Safia was the first to be recognized. But she was no longer the frightened child people remembered. She stood tall, dressed in simple but elegant clothes, carrying herself with confidence. Beside her was Meher, now a doctor, her calm presence radiating assurance. And Noor, vibrant and creative, carried a spark that drew attention wherever she went. The town watched in stunned silence. They hadn't just returned. They had transformed. But the real shock came moments later. Instead of heading anywhere else, the 3 women walked straight toward the edge of town, toward the small, worn house where Harun still lived. He was sitting outside, repairing an old chair, just as he had done for years. His hair had turned gray, his hands rough with time. He didn't notice them at first. Not until Noor ran forward. What followed was a moment no one who witnessed it would ever forget. The girls, no, the women, fell into his arms, and for the first time in years, Harun broke down. The man who had carried so much in silence finally let his emotions show. But the surprises didn't end there. Over the following days, the town learned the full extent of what had happened. Safia had become a lawyer, dedicated to protecting vulnerable children. Meher had returned not just as a doctor, but with plans to build a small clinic in Ravenspire. Noor had established herself as a designer, and she brought with her resources to help rebuild parts of the town. Together, they had come back with a purpose. They didn't just want to see Harun. They wanted to give back. Within months, Ravenspire began to change in ways no one had imagined. The clinic provided care to those who had long gone without. A small learning center was established, offering education to children who couldn't afford it. Local businesses received support, and the once forgotten parts of town slowly came back to life. And at the center of it all was Harun. He never asked for any of it. But the girls, his daughters, made sure he was never overlooked again. They rebuilt his house, but kept its heart the same. They sat with him every evening, sharing stories, laughter, and quiet moments that felt like home. The town, once skeptical, now stood in awe. Because what they witnessed wasn't just success. It was the return of love. The kind of love that grows quietly, survives hardship, and comes back stronger than anyone expects. If this story has touched your heart so far, take a moment to like, comment, and share it, because stories like this deserve to be felt and remembered. As time passed, Harun's health began to decline. Years of hard work had taken their toll. But he faced it with the same quiet strength he had always shown. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, he sat surrounded by the 3 girls he had once carried through life. There was no regret in his eyes. Only peace. He had given them everything he could. And in return, they had given him something even greater, a legacy. A story that would live on long after he was gone. Before we reach the end, here's a special request. Comment, kindness always returns, if you believe even the smallest act of love can change a life. Because in Ravenspire, it didn't just change one life. It changed many. Harun passed away quietly, with his daughters by his side. But his story didn't end there. The clinic, the school, the renewed town, all stood as living proof of what one man's decision had created. Years later, people still spoke his name with respect. Not because he was rich or powerful, but because he chose kindness when it mattered most. And sometimes, that's enough to change the world. If this story stayed with you, if it made you feel something real, don't forget to engage with the video and share it with someone who needs a reminder that goodness still exists. Because somewhere, in a quiet corner of the world, another Harun might be making a choice that will change everything.